Okay, so welcome. This is my fourth language learning around the world interview, and my special guest today is Ms. Pompi from New Delhi, India. And she is a professor of English at Christ deemed to be University, the Delhi NCR campus, and she's working on her PhD in translation studies. So Ms. Pompi, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of your series, and I'm looking forward to the conversations that we would have and have a discussion around how English is very much a part of Indian curriculum. Yeah.
So what can you tell us about yourself besides my basic introduction?
Yeah. So I've been teaching in Christ Delhi NCR for last 2.5 years now. It's going to be 2.5 years in another a month or two. And I have been part of English teaching for a long time. So before I started teaching full time here, I worked in publishing house for a while, half a year, which focused on the digital aspect of ELT teaching, that is English language teaching. And this was targeted towards kindergarten to 8th standard students. And it was a very fun activity, trying to focus on bringing out the digitalized version of the printed books. For example, have software application based grammar activities, trying to proofread all of those contents, and also creating videos of the lessons and stories that are part of the syllabus. So it was a very fun exercise. And before that, as a PhD student, I also worked as a teaching assistant for a certificate course in English proficiency. And we had students ranging from 17 years of age to sometimes 50s as well. Some those who have retired, or those who are working as lawyers or as teachers as well, they want to improve their level of speaking or writing skills. So we cater to those needs by categorizing the students into three levels: basic learners, then intermediate level, and then the advanced level. So yeah, it's been quite taxing to look at English very objectively as a literature student in English, because English has always been part and parcel of how we express ourselves all the time. So to put oneself in the shoes of a student for whom this is a second language or a third language. For most Indians, this is like a third language or a fourth language, because we have our own mother tongues and we also have a local lingua franca. For example, for me, my lingua franca is Assamese, and my own mother tongue is Bodo. And we also have Hindi in our country. And then Bengali, which is very close to my own second mother tongue, the other lingua franca Assamese. So learning English is an added thing. And in India, learning English and then second next Hindi is part and parcel of trying to help oneself in the professional level. But of course, because of the colonial past that India has had, English has always been part of the medium of instruction or curriculum for almost a century or more now. Yeah.
So yeah, that's really fascinating. There's a lot there to to discuss. So when would you say the average Indian starts learning English? Would it be in kindergarten or when does that happen?
Well, nowadays the rate of students being enrolled into English medium schools is quite high, because as a developing country, India has always wanted to acquire English. I mean, I'm talking about the times since when English has become part and parcel of middle class aspirations as well. If you learn English better, then you will get better jobs. Now, the skill aspect of how good or bad you are in a job is not looked into, but the fact that you need to be able to communicate in English with a level of efficiency, that becomes more important. Yeah. So, so even in schools which run in the regional medium, or what is called as vernacular in India, even in those schools, sometimes English is, I think, started from sixth standard or from fourth standard, and in the English medium schools, it starts from nursery itself,
Okay.
the kindergarten level. and all the alphabet letters are sometimes taught at home itself, like A to Z numbers, and alongside your own mother tongue also, or any local language medium. Because by default, since we come from multilingual spaces, um, we are bilingual most often by birth. Yeah, we are always taught our own mother tongues first, and then the next most important language, I would say, rather than saying the next, mother tongue or lingua franca. Because in families, mostly in middle class families, or families where English is spoken, more often, um, the parents might teach English as well alongside their own mother tongue or any local language that they want their children to learn. Because this is also being observed that children from communities who are um, you know from a lower social standing per se, they are most often not taught their own mother tongue, because mother tongue is not going to be of use to them later as an adult. I'm
In
speaking
school, you
from own,
mean? They're not taught in
yeah, in
school and they're
schools. That's a different story as well,
okay.
because we have so many languages in India
Right.
that only very few languages are considered as standard. I think we have 16 or 18 only in number, and not all of them are part and parcel of the medium of instruction in schools. Sometimes these languages are introduced at a certain level, maybe from KG1, or the kindergarten, the first level after the nursery, or maybe in first standard, and then I think till eighth standard we are taught most of the languages. I think most schools focus on, apart from English, we might have Hindi as well going, and Sanskrit. Nowadays, Sanskrit has also been brought back, since
Oh
there's
wow.
a attempt to revive Sanskrit again, because Sanskrit is considered a dead language now because of lack of open communication, as well as literature is being written in Sanskrit, because it was a very socially very exclusive language at one point of
Right.
time. So that is why over the time its use was limited to only the scholars of Sanskrit. And so the the factor of the language being accessible to everyone was very limited. Yeah. So anyway, I think I've spoken at length
Yeah.
about Sanskrit. Let's move back to English. Yeah.
So how
So
about
in
you?
vernacular
Oh,
schools,
go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, in vernacular schools, like I mentioned, it starts from either fourth standard or sixth. Then it continues, and after 10th, if you're studying further, like in high secondary or 10+2, English becomes by default the means of instruction for almost all the streams of study, like arts or science and
Right.
commerce. And you might have a vernacular instruction for some, but those students might not fare really well when they go ahead to say undergrad and masters and all that, because the amount of information and curriculum designing that happens takes place in English.
Okay.
Yeah. So in order to
So
excel in the later stages of degree, one has to be trained well enough in English. That becomes the criteria.
so how about you personally? When did you start learning English and what memories do you have of that experience?
That's a very good question, because my father studied in Assamese medium, and my mother studied in Bodo medium. And I don't know why. So when I was growing up, I used to notice that this is my personal experience. It's not a generalized idea at all. I'm just putting out a disclaimer. So I used to see students from English wearing tie and going to schools. So it was my aspiration that, father, I want to go to a school where students wear tie and go. I don't want to just randomly put up a dress and head off. So I did get enrolled in an Assamese medium school, and I didn't like the lack of bit of discipline and structure. And after a month's time, my father had me try in other schools as well. I failed the entrance in most of these schools because I had just moved from a very small town to Guwahati. Guwahati is a major town in northeastern part of India, and luckily, after a lot of training and all at home, I got through. in one school in English medium. So you can technically say I studied from nursery in English medium only.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Hindi was part from my LKG level, the very next standard. And I have a very good memory. I was very good in remembering. So I kind of finished my nursery syllabus within a month. So I was promoted to LKG. So I had Hindi then, and till my eighth, I had Hindi. Then I opted to continue with Assamese, like Assamese and Hindi and English. They were all the three subjects, language subjects that I was taught in my school, and I opted to continue with Assamese till my 10th, that's both studies. And later onwards, since I was deviated towards English and literature, so I continued taking alternative English or advanced level of English papers. Then my major in English also happened. Yeah. So this is
So,
like a very average picture of most Indian
yeah.
students.
So as you said, there are lots of native languages in India. So I don't know if you can really answer this question because I don't know how the
Okay.
different Indian languages compare, but what would be some of the
Yeah.
general problems that
Mhm.
Indians of whichever languages might have learning English in
Mhm.
terms of pronunciation or grammar or what have you?
Okay. I think the problems that a second language learner usually face when picking up a new language, I think uh, someone from a vernacular language would have a very strong grammar background. This is something that we had observed because they were taught the language structures like subject verb predicate and subject verb object or SOV, those combinations. But otherwise, for the rest of us, since we were instructed in English from a young age,
Okay.
it's more of like imitating the structures over the years as an adult. Because if you ask me, what is the pattern of present perfect tense, I may not remember the sequence.
Right.
So it's more of acquiring it from a young age, and
Okay.
as an adult, you're imitating what would be the best place with a verb form here than the other one. So the nitty-gritties of grammar structure are mostly taught and acquired in vernacular medium schools than in English medium.
Okay. And just for comparison's sake, since Hindi and
Mm.
English are official languages in India,
Yeah.
you know, for example, comparing Korean, because I'm here in Korea, and English. So English is an SVO language and Korean is an SOV language. And
Mm.
Koreans have trouble with sounds like f. So my name to them would not be Jeff, it would be Jep because they change f to p usually, and they add
Yes,
they need a pattern of they can't have consonant clusters, so there has to be a
I
vowel
understand. Yeah.
and so forth.
Mm.
So regarding Hindi, which I guess is also an SOV like Korean,
Yeah.
if I want to learn Hindi, what problems might I have in terms of grammar or pronunciation?
Okay. Indians, I think, have this inherent nature to put ing because say, मैं कर रहा था, I was doing it, rather than British English putting the same content as I did it. I had been reading it. I have been reading the book for a long time. This is more appropriate of an Indian context who likes to put an ing,
Okay.
present continuous kind of verb. Whereas the most simplistic expression of the same in British English would be like I read the book, or I have been reading this book for a while. The obsession with ing is very strong in Indian English. Then yeah, there are certain Indianness which comes through in English as well. Like it's very common to use na suffix na, or like say for example, हम ये कर रहे थे ना. So this is an affirmative to say na at the end, like we had been doing it, isn't it? So isn't it portion is always replaced with and or no, because na also means no. Like you are asking an affirmative, through affirmative, context for the other person to speak it back to you, affirming that yeah, you had been doing it. So these are two small things, and apart from that, we also have a habit of stressing one word over by repetition over and over again to express the level of intensity of an activity. मैं तो ये पढ़ ही रहा था, मैं तो ये पढ़ पढ़ के पागल हो गया हूँ. Like I've been reading and reading and reading and going crazy. This is a literal translation. So you could just express the same by saying that I've I've been driven crazy by reading it for a long time, or the book is driving me crazy, or I'm unable to take it. So depending on the level of your expertise with the language, your construction of the same would also become complex over the time, to compound sentence and then complex as well, or to become very brief. Like brevity might be lacking in someone who is acquiring English for the first time, because the tendency is to replicate our own mother tongue language structure in English again. Like this is something which, as translators or aspiring translators or translation theories students, we are we go through this ordeal of practicing on our own, or through our teachers guidance. We do it in classrooms. So this is something that has been observed, that because that language structure of SOV is ingrained in our minds, so we tend to replicate the same when we are writing English also, which is why more often translations are not always preferred over the original. I think that is one aspect of it. Then of course metaphors too, like literal metaphors will not work. For example, this is a very commonly referred example, like it's raining cats and dogs.
Right.
If you translate that into any local language, that phrase or the metaphor will not, the idiom will not have the intended meaning, that it's been raining heavily.
Yes.
So
How
in
do you,
Hindi it
how do
would
you
be
say
like,
that in Hindi or other
Hindi,
languages?
yeah. It would be like कुत्ते बिल्लियों की बरसात हो रही है. कुत्ते means dog, billi means cat, की बरसात हो रही है. So it's been raining cats and dogs.
But do you have an equivalent expression in Hindi for that? I know in some languages they say it's raining knives or husbands, different things.
हाँ, yeah, yeah. In Hindi, since I'm not a native speaker as well, um, I I don't think there's any specific idiom for this, but I know barish is not used, universally in all the Hindi speaking,
Okay.
states as well. In some places they use pani ho rahi hai. Pani means water, so it's dropping water. Say my friends from Madhya Pradesh would say, "आज तो पानी हो रहा है," या फिर "आज पानी गिर रहा है." गिर रहा है means it's falling. It's falling, not dropping, falling water. Yeah,
Okay. And
yeah.
the script, can you talk about I guess
Devanagari script.
it's
Yeah.
is it it's an abugida, it's not really an alphabet, is that correct?
Yeah, it's a combination of both the no, this is just the consonants only. The
Mhm.
vowel
Okay.
table is a different one. Yeah. So
Okay.
we have some more markers. For
Okay.
example, nga sound, then nia sound, which are not represented here. So that's a separate four line at the bottom, right after kya, ranya that you have presented. Below that, there are another four more lines. So that's the case with other Indian languages as well. But say if I speak about Tamil, Tamil is one of the most ancient language in India, right after say Sanskrit. Tamil also has a culture called literary tradition called Sangam literature that dates back really long back. I think sometime in fourth or fifth BC, if I'm not wrong. I could be wrong, not BC or maybe AD. I'm not very clear which part it is. So just like in Korean language, even they have a problem with two pa sounds coming together, like two simultaneous vowels. So my name, which is actually pronounced as Pompi, it becomes Pombi. But the second pa sound becomes a ba for them too. So there is some difficulty with some of the sounds being expressed because it wasn't added to their table till then. So I think language tables become, the alphabet tables become more complex as sounds get more added over time.
Okay.
I remember you asked me a question about certain words and sounds which become difficult for Indians to replicate in English. I think it would be the ra sound, R, which is represented by R. So Indians have a habit of stretching the, ra sound a lot. It's very pronounced. So, which is why we have many words which are also called as anglicized, because the colonial masters couldn't pronounce the local word with a sound, native sound to it. So it got modified to a different. For example, Handik is a surname, which is an anglicized one. It's an Assamese surname, but the original surname is Kondikoi. They couldn't pronounce Kondikoi, so it became Hendik
Hmm.
in the English or Anglo pronunciation.
Okay.
Yeah, there are many such words like there are many Bengali surnames. I'm not getting the equivalent ones. Like, uh, I guess it's better not to make any, uh, misconstructed example here in the
Okay.
video because it might be, misinterpreted. Yeah, but there
Okay.
are such, surnames, places as well whose names got changed. Yeah,
So I have some words here you might know of others
yeah.
that English has borrowed from Hindi. So it's hard
Hmm.
for me to see with my own background, but it's
Jungle
jungle,
and
uh,
bandana,
bandana, shampoo,
pajama,
oh, pajamas,
shampoo.
sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
um, bangles, and was it bungalow?
Hmm.
No,
Bungalow. Yeah,
bungalow.
bungalow is a
Um,
form of building. Yeah, building construction. Yeah.
so I'm interested in learning more about your PhD
Hmm.
topic. So
Hmm.
you said it's the post-colonial aspect of translation activities relationship with colonialism and knowledge production. So can you talk a
Yeah.
bit about your PhD focus?
Yes. So in my PhD research, I try to look at the aspect of publishing house, growing uh, once Assam. Okay, I belong to the state called Assam, which in the colonial times also had few other states which are independent today, like Nagaland, then Meghalaya and Mizoram. Those were part. Actually, this were the territories which the Britishers had conquered and put in together. So territorially, they became like one landmass that they were controlling. So it was named as Assam then. In around 1960s and 70s, due to strong linguistic movements, they bifurcated into their own individual states. So in my research, I try to look at how once the Britishers came in, whether it was for finding tea leaves, because around that time. British had lost the monopoly to sell tea and export it from China and sell it. So they had to find places in their own colonies from where they could export tea and sell, because by then tea had become a high selling commodity. It was promoted as a healthy beverage as well. I'm talking about 19th century, part of the history. So they moved to Assam, also because of political reasons as well, like the Ahom king who was reigning the state of Assam then. um, I think his uncle invited the Britishers to come and defeat this young boy, young prince, so that he could rule the land. But what happened is that we also had Burmish invasions happening simultaneously, and they had created a havoc and mass destruction everywhere. So Britishers also at around this point, they got to know through other, adventurers, or in today's modern lingo, trackers, who likes to go, discovering new places and lands. And I think his name was Charles Scott, him and his brother. They found natives native tribes from Arunachal Pradesh, current Arunachal Pradesh, who were preparing tea, native form of tea variety. So discovered that there are tea, plants growing wildly in Assam. So they looked at this from a investment point of view, that if we move to Assam, we have a fertile land where we can think about growing tea as a as a merchandise over the years. So they moved here, and they also called over missionaries. Those missionaries were working in Burma to move over here, so that the English language could also simultaneously grow. They can also have more people converting to Christianity and all that. So conversion and colonialism, they went hand in hand. And there's a very interesting book and essays written by Bernard Corn, who looked into colonialism and its forms of knowledge production. I think that's the name of his book, where he spoke about how it was very important to train the natives into English. But before this, this process could be done, uh, the masters, if whether they are the colonial masters, the English Britishers, or the missionaries themselves, they had to pick up the local language first, so that the language of command from the from their end could be addressed first, and then the natives could be explained about the benefits of conversion, and also say learning English, because acquiring English is going to help them gain jobs in the government sector, like civil services, and because those kind of jobs would pay you better than working in the fields, because there was factory and all the industrial revolution based advancements that happened. And the introduction of train in this region also happened because so that the goods, like natural resource, mostly like coal mines were discovered, they could be exported back to other parts. Yeah. So the region where I come from was known for tea, then silk, and not so much on spices, but yes, coal mines, like coal, then oil, natural
Okay.
gas, and all that. Yeah. So yeah, in my thesis, I looked at the travelogues, that the amount of knowledge that started being written on the region, and the people, the languages, and also stories about folklores from communities where written script was not present, and how conversion and uh, conversion also helped people to, I mean, it tried to push people towards the concept of being a civilized community, the way Westerners look at it, that giving up your own native indigenous identity, or of being a pagan and being a believer. You know, those ideas were more in play in those times, and then so the amount of history that also got written in order to so inwardly kind of politics also start taking over, where the native Assamese, who comprised the most elite group in the region, apart from the tribals, how they had their own linguistic feud as well with Bengali, because Bengali was a very similar language in terms of the script, and the way the pronunciations also take place. For example, if I have to speak, say my name, like in English it would be my name is Pompi, in Bengali it would be Amar Naam Pompi, in Assamese it would be Mur Naam Pompi. There's just very minor difference in terms of how the pronunciations take place. For example, say in Hindi, the name for India is Bharat. Then in Bangla, also Bengali, they would also call it as Bharat. And Assamese, it would be again pronounced as a Bharat only. The roundedness in pronunciation is slightly different. Assamese is more subtle. Bengali is a little more stressed. This is how the variations happen. And so there was a problem in terms of hegemony, in terms of say which came first between Bengali and Hindi, sorry, Assamese as well, which is why the history writing even increased, because by early 20th century, the need to create a niche for one's own region in the world map, because by the time English had also started become more popular, the natives understood that we are at a doorstep where anything we write in English would be read by others also. Like the target audience for English has been has always been, the Western audience in those times, and or maybe the educated few Indians in the pan-Indian, space. It was considered like that. So someone from the portion of Northeast India, if they write in English, then it was considered that it would be read by the, English masters, and also a few educated Indians in English. So history writing also increased in order to create a space or to mark the presence, more so like marking the presence of, the region of Assam, the Assamese community, and how uh, we are not very different from the Aryan race. So we have this historian named Surya Kumar Bhuya who stressed about this point very strongly by making very comparative, presentations. Like we have Prithviraj Chauhan from who was an Aryan, king. So in order to show the strength, military strength, or how good a local king was, he used to make comparison and say that so and so king was like the Prithviraj Chauhan. He was, I'm just making a rough caricature that he was, very strong, and he had conquered this many places. So those literatures also had an intended audience in their mind, and most often it was, in order to educate the, fellow people, because until the Britishers had acquired what is known as the landmass of India today, uh, India as such did not exist as a unified nation. It was different regions and territories who had their own independent, kings as well, who would be trying to conquer one another. Most often that's how the story is. We had a lot of,
Yeah.
local kings who would try to conquer one another or expand their own, region. So yeah, and it's only because of the coming of Britishers that, this border line got marked more prominently. Otherwise, we had Indus Valley, or Indus River, which bifurcated, or say made Indian subcontinent, prominent landmark in the map. So when conquerors need to, come to India and all that. Yeah.
Wow, that's that's fascinating. So, um, you've probably already addressed it a little bit, but what would you say the impact of that history that you just described is today
Yeah.
in India in terms of any aspect that you think is important, political, social, economic, or whatever?
Well, I think to a great extent, we have overcome those issues now. It's mostly the, tribal communities. Within tribals also, there are sections of tribal communities who have benefited because of, the reservation which was brought in the Indian Constitution, thanks to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And so there are tribal communities from interior parts, like from Jharkhand, where one of my friend, he frequently goes to teach English to the, tribal students, and there are lack of teachers there, or natives who have been trained enough to come back and work as a, teacher regularly. Also because not often these are well-paid jobs, or government funds may not reach on time, or maybe the money is very less. So to an extent, if it's not a very, self-interested job, maybe uh, there may or may not be a lot of scope of a career growth in that, to an extent. And also if because most tribals are not from very, well-off economic background, so they don't really go on to study very high degrees. These are based on, studies that are being done, that in comparison to other communities. Like say for example, in India we have had caste system for a long time. Caste system bifurcated the entire society into, Brahmin class, then you have Kshatriyas, then you have scheduled caste, and then the tribes as well. Scheduled tribe actually do not really fall within the perimeter of the caste system. Most often they are, brushed off as, untouchables, because of, the caste hierarchy, which privileged the, Brahmin class. Now after India became independent, and there was a strong attempt to restructure these biases, the lack of privilege for certain sections. So it helped to change the the system and how the system is going to benefit different sections of the society. So that has helped some, in fact, a lot of people from, I mean, this division of percentage of reservation was made in terms of the population, and some sections benefited, some are still in the process of gaining the profits, you know, based on reservation. So in many tribal families, probably the current generation might be the second generation who is getting educated, or they might be themselves, you know, the first in their own families to have a doctorate degree. I'm the first in my family who has got a doctorate degree. We do not have any medical doctors in my family. I might have been able to do it, but I did not really persist enough to stick in that career. Yeah. So it happens. So even if, say, we might blame reservation today by saying that what about those who are from economically, you know, backward classes? Now that's a new category that has come up now to benefit those from general category, like who do not belong to any of those, you know, caste systems and all that. But historically, their community has also benefited, you know, them getting reservation because they are economically low. Because in the current scenario in India, upper caste has to an extent also been replaced by upper being an upper class person in terms of an economy and being, you know, high educated person. Like now, although I might be a scheduled tribe person because of my, you know, education and exposure I have had in the profession I'm into now, I might be considered as to an extent an elite person because of the access my exposure might give me. Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So what can you tell us about the courses that you teach?
yes. So in India, in most institutions, like in engineering institutions, and like in our university in Christ, we have professional English or communication skill based paper compulsorily given to the students in the undergrad level, because we understand the need for refining one's English. Because after all, apart from all these skills and knowledge and information you acquire for your subject, you also need to be able to articulate it well, to present it in your own professional spaces, because all the reports you write, all the documents you're going to do is going to be in English. And say your job will also require you to make presentations and all that. So if you're not articulate, and if you your body language is also not, you know, as is required, then you might not stand a chance to, you know, form a good impression, or maybe that might also reflect in your social behaviors as well. So English is supposed to be taken as not just the language part, but to an extent a grooming, you know, form of a, you know, segment. It was part of the MBA programs. Now, because of lockdown and extensive online classes, I think more focus is given on their own skill-based or professional, you know, grooming courses. English has taken a setback in them. So, but yeah, otherwise, we have literature programs running. So, based on my own PhD expertise, I'm teaching Indian writing in English, then Indian literatures in translation as well. So, I touch subjects which bring in language and society at a cross section, and multilingualism as part of, you know, Indian, you know, language or literary system or culture. Then I teach literature as well in undergrad level, or British literature as part of English major courses. And so the subject that I really enjoy teaching the most, I believe, would be Indian literature in English and translation, because um, as someone who grew up in, you know, grew up in an Indian system where English, I mean, it's very ironic that my own mother tongue never features as one of the, you know, professional languages that I know, because I was never trained in it. To write, I can speak, but to have the same knowledge in terms of professionalism is a different picture altogether. So it's a very, you know, you know, ironic scenario that for Indians, English is always the first, you know, professional advanced language that you know. So, so when I taught that paper, of course, I have read some of the essays, you know, in my, you know, PhD phase as well. But this was more of a take from comparative literature perspective, which is a, you know, later, you know, evolved subject. after literature, then comparative literature, cultural studies, and all that, thanks to post-colonialism, study. So in this, we looked at how Indian writing is most often wasn't taken very seriously in the English-speaking world because of the very absurd construction of these sentences. So the most cited example is that of Kantapura, which is the first novel in English by Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and he tried to retain the SOV form of subject object verb. Excuse me. Can I have water?
Yes, sure.
Because of the cold,
Yeah,
it was tend to be irritated. So
take your
yeah, I
time.
was speaking about.
You're talking about SOV.
Yeah, yeah. So so there's this very interesting reference made by Meenakshi Mukherjee in her essay about Indianness of Indian writing, where she mentions that in order to defend the English that Ramon Roy has used in his novel, he brings out a preface which talks about how he is in London when he has written that preface, and I think I don't remember if it was published in a local newspaper, but in that preface, which I taught in the class later, that he is trying to find a place for Indian writing in English because it's very interesting that outside that's outside of India. Um, in the times when the novel was written, that was in 19th century, late 19th century, that they don't understand the level of or the advancement of English as part of the educational curriculum. But this has happened. But thing is, Indians are translated people because we have our own mother tongue in which we think and talk and converse with our own fellow beings. But when it comes to writing, most often we are bilingual, and or maybe we are more biased towards writing in English than say our own mother tongues. So it would definitely carry a part of who we are as Indians, which is why the sentence structure might sound absurd to you. The phrases might not make coherent meaning to you, but it does to me. So I'm going to retain it. So that was the first idea with which that novel came out, and after that we have series of writers in English, and then the most latest author which she picks up was Salman Rushdie. He's still alive, and he's a world-renowned writer, and his novels like Midnight Children, then Satanic Verse are very much part of post-colonial studies discussion. So about him, he also on his own writes extensively about how does an Indian place himself in the world scenario. So
Okay.
are we Indian enough inside, or we are not because we speak in our colonial masters language. We communicate in the colonial masters language when it comes to professional spaces or trying to be very expressive. That is one. At the same time, how do we assert our individualism or the uniqueness of our own identity? So we have a word called chutney. I am not sure if you would know it. So chutney
Okay.
is like the dips, DIP dips you have for different food items,
Okay.
different sauces that are mixed together in
Hmm.
Korean food items, right?
Right.
So chutney is similar to that. Different it's like condiments being put together to go as a side dish to enhance the flavor of something.
Right.
So since chutney is a mixture of different things and it has a strong flavor, so somewhere English language is like chutneyfying. It's a chutneyfied English that we speak, so it has the local flavors added to it, the Indianness so called through cultural references and local metaphors sipping into the language structure. Somewhere we are not speaking SVO but SOV to an extent as well, and we are celebrating the uniqueness with which we come as a package
Right.
rather than trying to. imitate the received pronunciation and British English structure, or say imitating US English as well, because US English is very much part of the MNC
Okay.
corporations or MNC jobs that people do. Yeah.
So I'm just curious. I was thinking, because I know my native language obviously is English, but I also speak Spanish and some Portuguese, and I'm trying with Korean. But as far as you're concerned, you speak a lot of different languages, and I don't know how often you use which one, but which
The
which
switch.
language or languages would you say you normally think in?
I think I guess it depends. For example, most often I think maybe I think emotions and feelings do not have any language. But see, if I have to express it, then at my most primal form, I guess I might be either my own mother tongue, that's Bodo, or English maybe, because I have learned to switch into English most often now as a teacher also. And as teachers, we also need to be quite expressive, and sometimes voice out the doubts that our students have in their mind, as if we are intuitively gathering it. So I think I have to an extent learned to be very expressive in terms of use of words vocabulary wise in English. So yeah, either my own mother tongue Bodo or in English. Yes, between these two
And
I would have to
are
choose.
your students all from India? Where are they from?
Yes, I think in our university right now we have around 80% Indian students, because this is a comparatively new campus. They
Okay.
started in 2019. In our master's program, we have one student from Oman, but her
Okay.
English is quite good. She's an advanced learner, you can see. And we do have Indian students who have settled abroad, like the parents have settled abroad, but then they come to India for studies as well, mostly from Gulf countries. Yeah, and their English is quite good as well, and they're here for the exposure, as well as I think in comparison to Gulf country, the Indian education system is comparatively better, so they move here for study purpose.
So I just have one or two more questions. Um, so what tips would you offer to language learners or language teachers, meaning foreign language learners or teachers? Do you have any special tips or techniques?
Yes, I think culture is a very important part of language learning and teaching. For example, if I have a student, I mean, during my teaching assistant days as a certificate course teacher, what I understood is that most often in cultures where English is a second language, you are taught the technical aspect of using it, but contextually, you may or may not be very well versed. So, understanding that in some cases, calling a say addressing a woman as a madam or a lady, use of lady to an extent is outdated now. Say, or sometimes you can just address someone as a friend, saying hello, how are you, rather than using a phrase like hey. Hey is very American. It doesn't respect the conservativeness that a society comes with. So I think society, then culture, these things also have to be kept in mind when you are teaching students. And it's also very important for the teachers to place themselves in the shoes of their students, and making a lot of comparisons, or relatable examples being drawn. For example, I was teaching in the basic level as well. Sometimes, in order to tell the name of an object, I cannot construct a long sentence and say this is the name. What if they don't get that the word name is signifying the nomenclature? Right now, to explain the same simple concept, I'm using more complex words, like to say that this is a glue. I might have to open and show the function of this object, like
Right.
that it sticks together and all that. So somewhere, bringing in sign or signifying it through use of signs will also be useful. Say, to say that the name of a specific fruit is apple, you can bring it to the class and show them
Right.
this is apple. Call it as apple. And yeah, using a lot of worksheets would be very helpful. We used to refer to Cambridge, worksheets that are available for basic level. Sometimes it's B1, B2, like that. So identifying the level of your student is very important, so that you're able to help them better by understanding where they stand first. I mean, that's the first job, I guess. You need to understand the level of your student, and accordingly, increase the amount of knowledge you are going on, giving them. And I think reading is a very important habit any learner should have. Try to read not just grammar books or composition books, rather trying to read literature. This literature will keep you engaged with the story. It might also make you curious to find out the word whose meaning is not making sense to you, and you are stuck there and you cannot move ahead with the story. And reading can also help increase one's critical thinking, opinion making sometime. And if it's a mystery story, or if it involves a lot of plot twist, then it can also help a student enhance one's um, understanding level as well.
Okay.
So reading should be made a strong part and parcel. Then also practicing writing, then improving vocabulary is quite important, because say if we give a target to our students that learn 5 words every day and also
Right.
form sentence with those words, then the achievement they would the sense of achievement they would feel, validation after having done it, you checking it. And say for example, out of 5 sentences they have wrote 3 correctly. So those would be small instances for you to correct the grammars also. Or you could, and yeah, I can give one more example. Say you were teaching English to adult group, and
Okay.
you are also fluent with one of the languages that the speakers are familiar with.
Hmm.
I used to teach Assamese to the IPS officers, like Indian Police Service officer. They are stationed in different parts of the country. So
Right.
those who were stationed in Assam and Meghalaya, they had to learn Assamese, and Hindi and English was common for that group of students and me. So, in order to teach them Assamese, I would always bring in an equivalent Hindi word or an English word. So that would help them to remember through comparisons. So equivalence, teaching them the equivalent terms are also one way of helping them pick up language structure very easily. And another tip would be showing them movies or songs, something that's funny or catchy, and that will help them feel, that would give the ease of comfort first and foremost, if it's a simple form of a language being used in something, and it would stay in their minds as well. They'll go back to it. So building the confidence is very important, then familiarity, then slowly introducing complex terms and all that. Yeah.
Okay. And finally, do you have any final thoughts or words or questions before we go?
Jeff, I think you're doing a wonderful job. I think the
Thank
fact
you.
that you reached out to me to understand about how English functions in India, I hope the learners would understand that language and culture and society, they work hand in hand. And English is a global language now. We cannot really do away by saying that I would prefer my own native tongue, because in our own cases we can say that I understand English might be causing many languages to die away uh, by losing one's existence as a literature. But I think it's on us as well to keep those languages alive.
Definitely.
Yeah, because this language has become a cosmopolitan, not just identity; it's a commodity now. You need to know it in order to communicate and survive. It's part and parcel of our daily life now. So we might as well accept that and help other languages also exist. With more literatures being written on it, and more content being created, like audiovisual contents created, or learning tools being created. Yeah. Or translating those stories from those languages into a known system. You can help people have more knowledge about the existing cultures, and increase more readership basically. Yeah.
Well, thank
Thank you,
you,
Jeff. Looking
Pompi,
forward
for
to it.
taking the time to to talk to me and share your expertise. It was really interesting, and I wish you the best of luck on your PhD, and thank you again.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And yeah, I hope in my own way I would be able to make some form of contribution in the long run.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you.
You're welcome. Thank you. And